Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Bible for Friends. I'm joined here with Spencer and Jared, and today we made it to the final chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes. It's only 12 chapters, but we've been spending a few months in this book. We were just talking about it. And I think the first time we met to study Ecclesiastes was back in March of this year. So nearly, I want to say 6 months, half a year in Ecclesiastes, and it's been quite the journey. And today we're going to finish out chapter 12 and also go back and reflect on a few of the key verses that we read throughout the book of Ecclesiastes and give some final conclusions for the book. And then we'll also see what the preacher's final conclusion is for this entire work and perhaps for his entire life, which was dedicated to finding wisdom in the life under the sun. All right. Can you guys still see the screen well?
Indeed.
Awesome. All righty. Spencer, could you open us up in prayer? Actually, we'll start with prayer today. And then could you also read the first two verses right after that?
I can. Hey, God, thank you for this day and bring us together to close out Ecclesiastes with you. Please help guide us and instruct us with your word and show us what you want us to see through the words in these slides. And yeah, let's get started.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
All right, sir.
Alrighty, so Ecclesiastes 12, investing in God early. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years approach when you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are darkened, and clouds return after the rain.
Thank you, Spence. Wow, okay, so when I was reading this, I was reflecting on how I often see young people, younger people, I guess, people our age, think that they're too young to look at, to seek God, to seek spiritual things, seek religious things, and this is a big mistake. This is a big mistake, and the preacher's going to explain that here. First reason is because we don't know when our life is going to end, as we saw in chapter 10. There's a verse in there where it says that it was like a parallel to what Jesus wrote in one of the gospels, said in one of the gospels that there's like a thief in the middle of the night that is going to come and take our life, basically, and we don't know when that's going to happen. And so the first reason we shouldn't wait to start investing in seeking after God and his word is because we don't know when our life is going to end. And if it ends before we get a chance to seek after God, then that's going to be our only opportunity to change our eternal destiny, and we will lose it. And the second reason is that when we are young, we are at our peak energy and strength levels. And so these are the best years that we can offer to God, and also receive the best return on investment when we seek his kingdom and invest that energy and that strength in his kingdom. And so then the question becomes, how can we invest in God's kingdom? Do you guys have any ideas how we can invest in his kingdom?
Give to others.
Yeah, it's kind of open-ended, but that's definitely a really good way to invest in his kingdom. It's something that's written in his word. Generosity. Do you have any comments, Jared?
I mean, one particular example that came to mind was the tithe, and I know Spencer and we talked a brief bit about this after church today, but giving directly to the church, whether it's, your time or your money, whatever resource you have.
Wow.
And then, yeah, just being generous to other people and giving when and where you can. And yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really good point that you touched on there, because that's what investment is. Usually we think of it as a monetary investment. And if we were looking for a way to invest our resources, our monetary resources, according to the Word of God, then yeah, that's an important principle to apply, is that we tithe to a place where we believe that His Word is being correctly preached, and so it's to our discretion, but just the intention and the uh, initiative to do this shows that our heart is not invested in the things of the world, but in the things of God's kingdom. And yeah, that's a really good one. The other ones I was going to say are just Sunday school level, very basic, but very important, is studying His Word. This would be an investment of money necessarily, but of our time, spending disproportionate amount of time learning, seeking spiritual things, especially things based on the Bible itself, in comparison to the time we spent in other areas. And also prayer is a really important part of that. Allowing God to communicate with you, and seeking to communicate with Him every day. And then as you pray and as you study the Word of God, then you're going to learn things, and there's going to be things that are going to be placed in your heart that you're going to want to follow. And so following His commandments, His instructions for living, is the other major investment that we can make in God and in His kingdom, giving Him our heart, which in the Bible is a representation of our will. So making our will His, instead of always listening to what our flesh wants us to do. We obey God's will above ours. And the two commandments that Jesus gives to summarize all the commandments are: number one, Spencer or Jared?
Oh, sorry. You caught me slacking.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. I was gonna ask the two commandments that Jesus gave to summarize all the commandments in the Bible were?
Love God and love others, basically.
Exactly. Yep. Correct. Love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength, with all your soul, and then love your neighbor as you love yourself. Yes. So, and like Spencer said, is giving, thinking about not just yourself, giving to others, and that can also include giving the knowledge, the wisdom that God gives you, and the good news, especially salvation. And another question here is, what do you guys think in verse 2? What do you think are the evil days when the sun, the moon, and the stars are turned to darkness? It says there.
And clouds return after the rain. Is that prophetic? Or is that like a general thing that happens?
Yeah, I think I would say it's prophetic based on what I've investigated. Yeah, I found a similar word or phrasing in another prophetic book. Yeah, I will say that. Any prophecy that you can think of, it's a little bit tricky. It's one that you don't really read often.
Clouds return.
You guys don't have it? No worries. We're going to study it right now. So this is a little bit tricky. This is a reference to maybe Joel was a reference to this, depending on who came first. But this is similar to Joel chapter 2, verse 31, where it says, "The sun will be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. And it comes about that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be those who escape, just as the Lord has said, even among the survivors whom the Lord calls." So this is referring to the day of the Lord, the infamous day of the Lord. Which,
In Revelation.
yes, it's in Revelation and a lot of also the prophets, such as Joel. And it's basically this concept in Judaism and in Hebrew thought that there's a day where God's going to judge. And there's been days in history that have been days of the Lord. For example, the event of the flood was a day of the Lord. It was a day of judgment, where God decided He's going to eliminate the people who were not repenting and not living according to His ways. There was violence everywhere on the earth, is what it said in Genesis, and they weren't repenting. The only one that was good in God's sight was Noah, and so God saved Noah, but eliminated those who did not seek God. And so this is a warning that the preacher is alluding to, is that we should be thinking about that judgment that's coming. And the sooner we remember our Creator, the days of our youth, the better, because the evil days will come. That's a reference to the days when our bodies will age, and also because there's going to be a day of judgment when the sun, the light, the moon, and the stars are all going to be turned to darkness. Yeah, so day of the Lord. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. You guys have any other comments or questions on that first portion?
The only thing I was going to add, and this is just where my thought process was before you explained all that, when it mentioned the darkening and then the clouds to come after the rain, I was getting ready to chime in and say that it sounds like it's talking about the end of something, or like the conclusion, but I didn't really have anything else to elaborate on in addition to that. But that's kind of where like my train of thought was.
Yeah, exactly.
Action,
That was
like a kind of like an aftermath.
exactly, yeah. It points you to something that's like an end of something, end of times. And the hopeful thing about the thing that gives us hope in this prophecy in Joel chapter 2 is that there will be those that come out, and it'll come out about that everyone who calls on the so there will be those that will be saved, and those are going to be the ones who call on the name of the Lord, and that name is going to be the name of Jesus. That's the name that is going to be revealed. Jesus is referred to as the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings, and he's also, his name means God's salvation, and so it's in his name. That's the purpose of his of Jesus's ministry on earth, is to be salvation for everybody who calls on his name. All right, continuing on in chapter 12 of Ecclesiastes. Jared, could you read these couple verses for us?
On the day that the watchmen of the house tremble and strong men are bent over, the grinders stop working because there are few, and those who look through windows grow dim. And the doors on the street are shut as the sound of the grinding mill is low, and one will arise at the sound of the bird, and all the daughters of song will sing softly.
Very poetic. So now the preacher is going to start describing allegorically the aging process, something that he's probably observed in his own body at the time when he wrote this, near the end of his life. And these are going to be the evil days that he's referring to in verse 1. And that's why it's important to remember our Creator in our youth, because our bodies deteriorate physically from fear. And so verse 3, it says, on the day that the watchmen of the house tremble and strong men are bent over. What do you guys think the watchmen are? They go another translation that I saw is like the guards, or the people, the people essentially who protect you. What part of the body would you think that's a reference to?
What part of the body?
Yeah,
Like bones. I don't know.
perhaps. Yeah, perhaps bones. The one that I've seen on in commentaries most often is that it's your arms. There's going to be a day where our arms are going to start trembling. Arms are what protect us, right? If somebody's about to attack you, you would put up your arms or defend yourself with your arms by instinct. And so this would be a reference to when our arms start becoming shaky and weak. And also the strong men are representing the legs of a person, or the things that hold you up and that lift things. That's the strongest muscle we have. The strongest muscles we have are the muscles that are in our legs. And there's going to be a day when those muscles are not going to work as well. They're going to be bent over instead of being able to stand up straight. And what do you guys think the grinders are?
Like people who, I don't know, like workers or no?
This is a little allegory of the body.
Teeth.
Yeah, our grinders. Or one day we're gonna have dentures, and we're gonna be talking like this because we're not gonna have grinders. There's gonna be fewer and fewer as our teeth start aging, and that's gonna be something to not look forward to. And what do you guys think are the windows that start growing dim?
The eyes.
Yep, our eyes they're gonna go to eventually. And what do you guys think about the doors on the street that are shut?
In the mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Our lips. Correct. They're also gonna stop working as well. What do you guys think about the one who arises at the sound of a bird? What do you think that represents? I guess that's not really a part of the body. Might be more of like something, a characteristic.
Is our spirit.
What's that?
Our spirit.
Yes, it could be related a little bit to the spirit. Arise, I think, is another word for like waking up.
Is it like the rooster? Or it's a, I don't know.
This one is a little bit tricky, but basically imagine that you're asleep, and like a small sound like the song of a bird, the sound of a bird wakes you up. So this represents when we get older. I haven't experienced it as much. I've experienced it sometimes when I've had like more anxiety because of some event that's coming up, but it becomes harder to fall asleep and to stay asleep, I should say. And you might have noticed this maybe with somebody older, a grandparent, a parent, that they start having more problems with insomnia, and even a little like creak will wake them up. And that's just a sign of aging. When we can't sleep as well. When we're younger, we tend to be able to sleep like rocks and sleep until as long as we want, which is a big blessing. But as we get older, that gets worse. And then the daughter's song represents our voice, basically. We won't be able to speak as loudly. Our voice will get quieter and quieter, and we'll be whispering because we have less energy, and it's all part of the process of life. Yeah, and it keeps going. Spencer, would you like to continue reading?
Indeed. Furthermore, people are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and the caperberry is ineffective. For man goes to his eternal home while the mourners move around in the street. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed. The pitcher by the spring is shattered, and the wheel at the cistern is crushed. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Futility of futilities, says the preacher, all is futility.
Thank you, Spence. Yes, so continuing in verse 5, this allegory of what happens when we start getting older. When we grow older, we become more fragile. Activities become more dangerous and harder for us to do. And so it says people are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. It could be a reference to the fragility and the risks of just walking, for example, as we get older, or going upstairs. It's definitely something to look out for, because to be afraid of is because a fall can cause a lot of damage to an older body. And then after that, this one's a little bit tricky. Wait, have you guys ever seen an almond tree? Almond tree. It's almost like
it's like a root.
No, it's a tree, and it has blossoms in a certain season. Maybe it's spring. It's similar to the cherry blossom. I don't know if you guys have ever seen cherry blossoms. Washington, D.C., I hear, is a region where they have a lot of cherry blossoms, and those are pink, right? But the almond tree has white blossoms, and so this is referring to the gray or white hairs that begin popping up as we get older. That almond tree is going to blossom, and our hair is going to get full of hairs that don't have the same pigment that they do now when we are younger. And the grasshopper, that's a representation of our vitality, our ability to spring up into action. It's that ability is going to start becoming more slower, and it's going to be dragging itself along instead of being springy and ready for action. And the caperberry, this one was a little bit tricky, but I found one commentary that said that this could represent the reduction of sexual desire. Because caperberry, I don't know if you guys have ever seen capers being sold at the store. Capers, sorry. Yeah, I don't know how it's pronounced. Capers, but it's a very it's like very strong, right? I don't know if you've ever
Yeah, it goes in picadillo.
Yeah, it adds a lot of flavor to foods. And I've read that in ancient times they believed that this food was an aphrodisiac. It's very common in the Mediterranean region. The caperberry tree or plant grows over there. In fact, I saw it in the Western Wall. There in the Western Wall, there in the cracks, they're bushes, not trees. There's caperberry bushes there, and so it's very, very common in the Mediterranean. So obviously, the author who was from that region would be aware of these fruits, or it's probably a fruit, a berry. And so that could be a representation of sexual desire, going down, and also just the vitality, general vitality, becoming ineffective. And what happens after that? Man's body finally passes away and returns to the dust. Man goes to his eternal home, while the mourners move around in the streets. And this could be a reference to just as we get older, catching up is going to be different. It's going to start involving sadder and sadder news or stories of friends that may have passed away, friends maybe dealing with sickness, and it's not going to be as lively and happy. But I've heard of my wife who was older parents. She was born when her mom was a lot older. She was the last child. Is that she's noticed that her parents, when they talk with their friends, they always talk about things like that are pretty sad. A friend that just died, somebody who's very sick, and that's something that's gonna come. It's gonna come for us too. Um, and then verse 6, he repeats this phrase: "Remember your Creator. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is broken." The silver cord. What do you guys think that represents in the body? That's a tough one too.
Is this something that connects to the heart, or like a
Yeah,
vein, or
it's connected to the heart. It's connected to a lot of parts of the body.
like veins, or
No, think of something that's more structural.
I was gonna say the spine.
Yeah, that's the commentary that I've seen most often. Though it is, spinal cord. The spinal cord will become, weaker and weaker, and in some cases, it could break. And that's also very sad. And the golden bowl is crushed. Golden bowl, I heard, represents the skeleton, but I don't see a good parallel there because it's not the same shape, but it could be related. And yeah, there's a lot of problems with the health of our bones as we get older. They become weaker and weaker, and they're more fragile. And then the pitcher by the spring is shattered, and the wheel of the cistern is crushed. The shattered pitcher is a representation of the stomach, and its function deteriorating. The wheel of the cistern, that's it said that it's also one I didn't understand very much, but this was a representation of the entire body being crushed. And I was trying to find a visual for this wheel and the cistern, and I found some images from cisterns like way back in the day, but still not as old as when this was written. And they were huge. Like this is what would bring up the water for you in the cistern that was below. And I don't know how that represents the body, but according to some commentaries, that's what the author was implying here. And verse 7, this is going back to the language of Genesis, where God gives the consequences of man's sin is that his body came from dust, and to dust it will return. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was. The body, which is dust, it's just organic matter, and it was to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. The spirit in Hebrew is the ruach, which just means breath or wind. And so our breath, which was given by God, because what in Genesis description of the creation of man is that God breathed into him, and that's how he became alive. And so that ruach, that breath, is going to go back to God who gave it. And so verse 8, futility of futility, says the preacher, all is futility. And, sorry. There you go. So the question I want to ask here is, seeing this poem of the aging process and aligning it with what we observe in other people who are much older than us, and seeing how their bodies definitely aren't what they used to be. How much time do you dedicate to things that are hevel or temporary? or, yeah, what do you guys think about this idea that our bodies, which seem so awesome right now, um, are going to eventually not work?
Can you clarify that just a
Yeah,
little?
you're right. That wasn't a good question. Sorry. It's a little tricky to word this. I guess what are you guys' thoughts on this point of reflection that our bodies are part of this idea that we've explored, which is something that's havel, something that is like air. It's here, and then try to grasp it, and then it's not. Have you guys thought about that with respect to your body? It's a big part of our identity, of our understanding of who we are.
Yeah, so while kind of reading through this, there's been a lot of sadly personal example that I've witnessed as we've kind of read through this chapter throughout the past several months. And for me personally, it's kind of like a constant reminder to just appreciate the present, like as far as well, and more specifically with our bodies, like enjoy the fact that we have vitality, that things work the way we need them to, that we're able to, enjoy doing things, certain physical activities because our bodies are still healthy, right? That there will be a time, we don't know when in the future, but where we won't have those luxuries anymore. We'll look back and kind of wish that we might have cherished those moments a little more. So just keeping that in mind and trying to enjoy some of those moments a little more as you think about, like the temporariness of it all.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, being living in the present and being grateful. Hmm. You have any commentary, Spence?
I mean, I've seen, I don't know if this is related, but I've seen like different people, like age differently. So some people, the people that take care of their bodies, they might live till they're 100 and still be able to do normal activities, right? Like they can still run, they can still drive their car every day, right? They can still walk, they can get out of bed on their own, feed themselves. And they might just die in their sleep one day, right? Just because like a mini heart attack or something. I don't know. And then there's people that don't take care of their bodies, and you really see them, like, let's say if they smoke and they experience a lot of different issues there, or they just don't work out and they just gain more and more weight to the point where they have to go in a wheelchair everywhere. I don't know if this is related, but it kind of makes me want to make sure I take care of my body just because of all the bad things that can happen in the future, right? And encourage other people to do the same. Yeah.
That's true. And thinking about it in the Bible, there's so many examples of men who lived like very long lives. And Moses is the one that comes to mind. Is he lived to be 120 according to the Torah, and it says that in the days when he passed away, his body was his eyes were not dim. In other words, his body was so full of vitality,
Exactly.
even at 120. And then God just basically took him because he wasn't supposed to go into the promised land. And I think there's definitely a point to be said that our body is a temple, that we're supposed to take care of it. And what you put into your body is what you get out of it, right? There's just that law. But this is, I think, the idea is to look at it from a relative perspective of based for everybody. The body, we have a different starting point and we have different decisions that we make, but over time our bodies are going to get worse relative to before. And what's the instruction? This is the thing to take away from this. What's the instruction that the preacher gives twice when we are in this time of youth, when we're not experiencing this deterioration necessarily yet.
Remember your creator.
Yes. Mhm. That's the thing that's hard for people who are young, who don't have as many, uh, who have more distractions, right? The bad thing about having a body that's full of energy and strong and resilient is that we get distracted easier because generally we become more self-sufficient. We think that we don't need anything, we don't need anybody. So spirituality kind of gets left behind. Something that it's a need that's not felt present or as uh, in the present as much as physical needs. And so the instruction to take away here is always remember your creator. Don't put all your hope on things that are temporary. The same message from the beginning. Don't put your hope, your heart on things that are rebel. Nonetheless, enjoy in the present and um, take care also of what you have. Administer things. Be a good steward of what God gives you. Yeah. So remember your creator. All right. Verse 9. Jared, could you read these next few verses? Or I think it was Spencer, Jared, Spencer, and then, yeah, this is the fourth slide. Yeah.
In addition to being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, and he pondered, searched out, and arranged many proverbs. The preacher sought to find delightful words and to write words of truth correctly. The words of the wise are like, is that goads?
Yeah.
And masters of these collections are like driven nails. They're given by one shepherd. But beyond this, my son, be warned. The writing of many books is endless, and excessive studying is wearing to the body.
Thanks, Jared. So here we see the preacher discovering, or maybe, yeah, discovering the purpose of his life. And he made a lot of mistakes because he tested things. He tested everything. But in the end, that all served a purpose. God used that so that he could arrange many proverbs and write down these words that have been preserved over thousands of years. And this is one of the verses in Ecclesiastes that makes me think that this had to be King Solomon, because the other person, biblical author that's very famous for writing many proverbs is Solomon. And there's even a verse that we read back when we were studying chapter 1 in the context of Ecclesiastes in the book of first or second Kings, where it talks about Solomon's life from a third person perspective. The author said that King Solomon wrote many proverbs, and I think something like 15,000 proverbs or something like that. And so it lines up even more here with King Solomon. And it's interesting because in Ecclesiastes we see the author being very honest that he's frustrated with all of the results of his exploration of what brings satisfaction in this life. But here you can kind of get satisfaction that it all served a purpose. He was able to teach people knowledge and write words of truth correctly from experience so that we don't have to make the same mistakes. And so this goes back to the principle that we talked about at the beginning of the study, which is one of the 7 habits of highly effective people from Stephen Covey, which is begin with the end in mind. Know when you put a ladder on a building, before you climb it, know what's going to be at the top of the building so that when you get to the top, you're not disappointed, and then you won't have an opportunity to climb the actual building you wanted to get to the top. And yeah, so this book helps us avoid climbing the wrong building in life, putting our heart in the wrong things in life, and in the end being disappointed. like happens to so many people, sadly. And then in verse 11, he describes his words of wisdom. Uh, he compares it to something called a goad in English, which is a farming tool that was used in biblical times and even after. That was basically used to poke or prod cattle who were pulling farming equipment. So cattle or oxen, sometimes they would get lazy, and to guide them forward, the farmers would poke them with a goad or a pointy stick to point them to keep going forward when they became stubborn or lazy. And so words of wisdom act the same way for us when we're lazy and we're stubborn, when we're going down the wrong path. They point us forward in the right direction. And then they also say, it also says that they're like well-driven nails. This collection of words is like well-driven nails on wood, for example. And this is basically meaning that they're hard to remove. When you have a well-driven nail, it's harder to get it out, which basically means that those words are very well memorized in our minds, and it's hard to forget, which is something good. It's painful though. It's painful because it requires repetition and confrontation too. But in the end, it's good for us. In the end, it's good for us. It makes us more useful. A wall with nails is more useful than a wall without nails. And it says that they are given by one shepherd, which is very interesting. Shepherd in biblical times, there's a lot of allusions to the profession of shepherds in throughout the Bible, and the Messiah is often described as being a shepherd who guides sheep to where they're supposed to be, so that they don't wander and get eaten by wolves or by another predator. And so it's interesting that it says one shepherd. It could be an allusion to Jesus, to the Messiah, and that the true author of all these words of wisdom is the creator of the universe. And so it could be a reference to that. And then verse 12 is a reminder that even seeking after wisdom can be something that can be disappointing in the end. It says, "Be warned, the writing of many books is endless, and excessive study is wearying to the body." There's an infinite amount of information. We're not designed to know everything. Our brains don't have that capacity, but we are designed to know as much as we can within a reasonable balance of where we spend our time. So it's just a reminder that wisdom is good, but it's not the end of the mean. It's not the end that we're supposed to strive for. And this is also something that can help us avoid a common mistake that is basically the inventing of a new religion. Oftentimes comes from people who try to philosophize excessively about what's already been written, what's already established. And this is something that Paul was teaching the believers in Corinth. There's two letters that Paul wrote to the church in Corinth, the Corinthians, and which was a city very close to Athens. Athens was a hub for philosophers and thinkers during the Greek Empire and also the Roman Empire after. And from there, there was a lot of confusion in those days. There was a religion called Gnosticism that was causing a lot of confusion to the new believers. And that's because people are trying to find their own way to find significance for life. And that can lead us away from true knowledge, which comes from God. So the other point to keep in mind. with wisdom. What do you guys think about these few verses? You guys have any other comments or questions? All righty. And actually, I forgot, I did have a quote in 1 Corinthians 4, an example of what I was saying before. Verse 6 of chapter 4, it says, this is Paul's writing, now brothers and sisters, I have applied these things to myself and Apollos for your benefit, so that you may learn from us the meaning of the saying, do not go beyond what is written. Then you will not be puffed up in being a follower of one of us over against the other. For who makes you different from anyone else? What do you have that you did not receive? And if you did receive it, why do you boast as though you did not? So he's teaching us to not go outside of what is written, and to be humble, to not think that we're to not seek prestige in being somebody who is reinventing the wheel, or coming up with something new, which is something that they loved in Athens. There's in Acts, there's a chapter where Acts 18, Paul visits Athens, basically the hub of people who were philosophers, and also people who worshipped Zeus and all these other gods from that time. And it says that they wanted to hear what Paul was preaching because it was new to them. They loved hearing new things that were interesting. And so we shouldn't try to seek what is new, but seek what is written. Go back to the original source, which is God's word. God's word is the original source of wisdom. All right. So finally, we get to the end of Ecclesiastes. And Spencer, would you do us the honors to read the last few verses of this chapter?
In the conclusion, when everything has been heard, is fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil.
Thank you, Spencer. All right, I ask you guys, what does it mean to fear God?
Recognize that he is like our creator, like remember that he's our creator and know that he has the power like over us, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. He has
He
a
has
final say.
infinite power and we have very finite power in comparison.
Yes. Jared, do you have any thoughts?
Kind of along the lines of what Spencer alluded to. I kind of, as like an example that I think of it, I kind of tie it to like a fatherly fear, right?
Mhm.
Like we have that respect for our
Exactly.
fathers, and whenever they kind of serve to kind of keep us on course, and to have like a healthy respect for them, and to kind of do the right things and live the right way. And so that's just kind of like a tie-in there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's definitely like a fear of actually the consequences of his power, of what he can do to us, and also a reverence, a respect of him as a father figure who knows best, and if he corrects us, it's out of love. And fear is what helps us when our love is not perfect. When we can't obey out of love, then obeying out of fear is easier. Just knowing that the consequences are going to come, that we can't escape them. And so another way that I've also heard it be described, which is helpful to visualize God as a loving father figure, is that fearing God can also mean that we are afraid to disappoint him, or even worse, to offend him. And that's, as I mentioned earlier, is because human love, sometimes it fails. It's sick, as it describes in the book of Song of Songs, there's a line there that's very beautiful, and it says that basically the love of a person is sick. It means that it needs to be healed. Our love is broken, and so sometimes what is more effective is to fear the consequences of disobeying, uh, which still leads us to repentance, leads us to staying away from something that can cause us to sin and temptation, and ultimately fearing being separated from God. And so eventually, I think as we mature, as our heart gets reprogrammed, rewritten, renewed, then love becomes perfected. And we learn to do things out of love because we love God, because we love our neighbor. We keep the commandments of God, and that's part of the process. And so, fear God. That's the beginning, and keep His commandments. It's the consequence, and this is something that applies to every person. Nobody is what's it called? Nobody is excluded from this, because God is not a respecter of persons. He doesn't take one group of people as different than another. Everybody is equal in His eyes. Everybody has fallen short of His glory, and so His commandments are for everybody. And so verse 14 says God is going to bring every act into judgment. It's just reminding us of that principle, is that that day of judgment is going to come. And everything that we've done, everything that we thought is going to be put on trial. And even the things that are hidden, which are not really hidden from God. And even the things that are good, they're going to reap a reward. And in the end, the one who's going to intercede for us in that judgment day is going to be the one on whom we call on His name, Jesus, God's salvation. And so the last thing I want to say is, in light of all of this, God's desire for us as His creation is not that we suffer and that we feel overburdened, but that His desire is that we experience pleasure and satisfaction, as it was in Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, in the original creation before the fall. And that's why He's given us an instruction manual to protect us from the consequences of sin, and to allow us to live a life with purpose. And so those are I guess I had another thing. Sorry. Yeah, I also had another verse that I didn't put here, just had it in my notes, for verse 14, where it says that everything, even what is hidden, will be brought into judgment. Jesus saying the same thing in Matthew 10:26, where He said, "There's nothing covered that shall not be revealed." So we have to keep that in mind. That will help us with our fear of God, is that we know that we can't hide anything from Him, and that's going to motivate us to have a more honest life with integrity, live with integrity. And I had one more cross-reference from Psalm 139, which will help us with this final idea of being known by God, and in accepting that and feeling loved by Him because He knows us, and knowing that we can't, we're not, we always have the opportunity to go to Him even when we make a mistake. And so verse 1, it says, "Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I get up. You understand my thought from far away. You scrutinize my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, Lord, you know it all. You have encircled me behind and in front, and placed your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is too high, I cannot comprehend." Yes, so that's something to meditate on. It was written by King David, the father of Solomon, and obviously Solomon, if Ecclesiastes is very likely written by Solomon, he would have a knowledge of this idea that God knows everything, even even our thoughts before we think them, or even our words before we speak them. And it's something that perhaps is too high for us to comprehend, but it's still something that brings us comfort and brings us trust in God. He can know us better than any person can know us. So put all your trust in Him. Remember your Creator. All right. Chapter 12 conclusions. And actually, before we go there, did you guys have any questions or comments from the last two verses?
Just a comment. Remember in chapter 11, we were talking about like judgment. I think this confirms what judgment that was talking about.
Oh,
Basically,
yeah.
everything, every act we perform like is subject to judgment, right? Is kind of what that was saying. It just didn't say like whether good or evil.
That's right.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think this confirms our theory though.
Awesome. That's the best, is when you use the Bible to interpret the Bible.
Yes.
The best Bible dictionary is the Bible. Nice. All right. Conclusions, just to recap chapter 12. The best stage of life to seek God is when we're young. We shouldn't wait for the evil days to come. And this life is our only opportunity. That's one of the reasons why we shouldn't wait. Life is our only opportunity to receive His mercy and salvation. And the third point is something that we saw in that allegory that he had of aging process. The vitality of our bodies is temporary and will progressively get worse until it returns to the dust. That was the progression. And then the preacher's life purpose was fulfilled in receiving and recording words of wisdom. It must not go beyond what is written. Fear of God leads to obedience. The final conclusion of this book, from all the investigation of the preacher, was fear God and keep His commandments. God's commandments protect us, and there's nothing hidden from God. That will help us in our fear, in maintaining our fear of God. All right. Yeah. So that was chapter 12, and the last thing I want to do is go back to a few chapters and read a few verses that stood out, just to remember a little bit more of what we learned in this book, because it's been a few months that we've been walking through it. There's a lot of good passages that we read. So first one, I'll read them so that you guys can just pay attention to the words and remember. Verse 24 of chapter 2. This one was, nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who can have enjoyment more than I? For God gives wisdom and knowledge, and joy to a man who is good in His sight. But to the sinner He gives the work of gathering and collecting. And so this is one of the phrases that we saw often is when things, you determine that everything is vanity, everything is Havel. There's nothing better than you should enjoy the present, enjoy the fruit of your labor. And the key here is that this requires wisdom and knowledge that comes from God. And God chooses whom He gives that wisdom and knowledge to. And He gives it to the people who are good in His sight, or who please Him. And the way we please Him, as we learned way back then, is through repentance, through coming to Him with humility, and not with arrogance. And that's why the sinner, he gets the work of gathering and collecting, which is the same work that somebody who's a believer has. It's just that he doesn't get to enjoy what he has. And so God gives us, in summary, the ability to be content. That's something that comes from God. And then chapter 3, we saw another beautiful poem that talked about how everything has its time and season. And it said, there's an appointed time for everything. There's a time for every event under heaven. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, He has put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end. So that was verse 11. But the first, these two verses teach us to have patience for things. Things won't always happen quickly. We have an expectation. We should trust that everything will happen in its time. Everything also happens for a specific purpose, a God-given purpose. And then here we get the idea that we weren't created for things that are just under the sun, because God put eternity in our hearts, and so we're made for something more than this, and we won't be able to fully understand it until we're no longer here. Right. And then chapter 4 gave us these beautiful verses about the importance of relationships. There was these verses from verses 9 through 12 where it said, "Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. Finally, a cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart." And when we read this, we also connected it with the idea of marriage and the health benefits, just to tie it to this idea of the benefits of having two instead of just being alone. And I found a study from like Harvard Health, which said that men who are married, who don't like live a single life or get divorced, who have a successful marriage, a happy marriage, they have greater life expectancy and better health when they get older. So this is part of that idea of, if we want to take care of our body, of our temples, we want to have longevity. If that's our goal, part of our legacy we want to leave behind, then marriage is something that will do us a lot of good, and is a big part of that. And then the final verse refers to the idea of when you meet the woman that God has for you, is to make sure that your relationship involves him as well. And he's going to be the one that's going to get you through all the storms of life, and married life specifically, which can be very, very difficult and complex. All right, so in then verse 9, moving ahead a little bit. This is the last one I found that I wanted to cover, is 11. I again saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, and the battle is not to the warriors, neither is bread to the wise, nor wealth to the discerning, nor favor to the skillful. For time and chance overtake them all. For indeed, a person does not know his time. Like fish that are caught in a treacherous net, and birds caught in a snare, so the sons of mankind are as ensnared at an evil time when it suddenly falls on them. And this teaches us that even if we work really hard, even if we have all the right skills, it doesn't guarantee that life is going to turn out exactly how we plan. So to not be control freaks, this is something that I'm saying mostly for myself, because I'm a control freak. I struggle with this idea of thinking that, of realizing that it really doesn't, in the end, it doesn't fully depend on me. In the end, time and chance happens as well. And everything is in God's hands. And it's this idea of faith, of emunah. Faith, yeah. Faith, emunah is in Hebrew, which is basically the idea that whatever happens, you realize that God allowed it to happen for a purpose. And so nothing in the end affects you. It doesn't cause you to lose peace, because even if circumstance appears to be terrible, it's really God's blessing in disguise. And so it's just a reminder to not trust in our own strength, trust in God in the end. But not also trying to say that we shouldn't try, we shouldn't work hard. That's definitely not the message. Just that we shouldn't put our trust in our own strength. Yeah, and that was all. That was all that I wanted to go back and revisit. Do you guys have any final comments or questions, or maybe things that you guys want to remember from this study?
I mean, yes, just thinking about the overall main idea that, the majority of the things that we're going to go through and experience in life are temporary or havel, and to just, be truly present in everything that you do, be grateful for what you have, keep God in the forefront of everything that we do, and enjoy our time while we're here, make the most of it.
Awesome. Yes. Exactly. I love that conclusion. You have any final thoughts, Spence?
I agree with that, and I guess the final conclusion for all of this, fear God and keep His commandments, and that will protect us while we're under the sun temporarily.
Yes. Amen. Yeah. And that they're also going to protect us in the next life, right? Because the the commandments lead us to the idea of repentance, of seeking for atonement for our sins, and the new covenant, the gospels, they reveal, the destiny of all those, or sorry, the ultimate sacrifice, which was Jesus on the cross, the ultimate salvation. So yeah, good way to close out this book, and we've got many more books to study in the Bible. So we'll continue that in Bible for Friends. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.